Welcome to the Veterans Summit. Monty Mann, I am so delighted to have you here. There are so many things that I want to ask you because we are going to be talking about the veterans' family life, how those that are married to service members or are related, any relatives, children, extended family, how they are impacted by the service that the spouse is giving. They are also serving the country by all the sacrifices they are making. And your husband, Scott, was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Army and a Green Beret. He's also been interviewed for the summit, and I know people will want to hear more about him after we conclude our interview. I would love to start, Monty, with how long have you and Scott been married?
It will be 25 years in November. November 11th, actually Veterans Day.
Is that right? That's incredible.
Yeah.
And during that period of time that you've been married, how long has he been gone? How many times did he deploy?
Wow. Well, I mean, he had lots of like smaller deployments, but he had 4 really long deployments to Afghanistan. So a lot, probably, it could be close to, 6-7 years or so total that he was probably gone.
And how long, when you say a long period of time in Afghanistan, how long would be like the longest deployment that he would be able?
It was just under a year. It was about 11 and a half months, the longest time he was gone.
Wow.
Well, it's funny because you get used to, you have the smaller deployments and you have the long deployments. And, somebody you talk to that's not in the military, they'll say, well, how long is Scott gone for? And I'll be like, oh, it's just 6 months. And their mouth just drops, just 6 months. And it's like, oh yeah, well that's much better than when it's a year, because sometimes it's a year.
And you have 3 sons. So during that period of time that he was gone, you're raising these boys by yourself, and you are dealing with him coming and going, and the whole role that the spouse has to fulfill is extraordinary to me. I don't know how you can let someone go and then have them come back and then let them go again. How did you do it? How did you manage that emotional upheaval?
Well, I think when I met Scott, I mean, when we were dating, I knew his dream was to be a Green Beret. I mean, that's all he ever wanted. And so I just knew that going into it, that he was going to be gone a lot and I would be by myself a lot. And if we had kids, I'd be by myself with the kids, raising the kids. And so I think a lot of it for me was kind of a mindset, you know what I mean? Just knowing that that's how it was going to be. And whenever, a deployment was coming, we would just kind of both get in the mindset we needed to, for him to do what he needed to do when he was gone and me to do what I needed to do back home.
Well, you are remarkable. You really are. And I wanted to make a reference to the children's books because I think they're so wonderful that Scott has written the mommy book, Mommy Keeps Us Free, and then Daddy Keeps Us Free. And they are wonderful books to help children understand the transition of where their parent is, what they're doing, why they're doing it. But in the very beginning of the book, Scott writes this beautiful dedication to military families everywhere that I'd like to read because it says so much and says so much about you as well. So it says, dedication to military families everywhere. During my career in the Army, I've not only been a soldier, but also a father and husband. I've experienced combat tours, numerous deployments to other countries, and demanding training events. I've missed more birthdays and special family events than I care to count. Those are the trials and tribulations of being a military man or woman. We know this from the outset. For this, many call us heroes. However, the real heroes are the wives, husbands, and children who remain on the home front and endure countless days, months, and even years of loneliness and uncertainty. It is this unwavering loyalty and sacrifice made by our families that enable our fighting men and women to do their jobs. These family members are the inspiration for this book. To all of you who keep the home fires burning, including my own family, thank you for your service to our country and for the freedom we enjoy because of you. I salute you sincerely, Scott Mann. And that is just so beautiful and so important that we don't forget that the families are serving in the military with their spouses. They are right there every step of the way, supporting what their spouses, what their family members, brothers, sisters are doing. They are right there. And one thing that I think that a question that I had was when Scott would come home and you would see him again, did you feel like you had to hold back, that you didn't want to tell him that the dishwasher's broken or that there are problems with the car, or that you wanted to make everything as calm? Or were you, because you were, as you said, sort of the two of you were in it together, in the mindset, how did you work that part of the relationship and the family rituals?
Well, I mean, as far as when Scott was gone, I never wanted to burden. I mean, not that it's burdening him, but I felt like it would be, because, you know, if something happens with one of the boys, or if, you know, they get in trouble, or this happens, or the dishwasher breaks, like you said, or something like that. I didn't want him to be worrying about stuff like that. You know, I wanted him to always know, hey, Monty's got it back home. You know, she's got the household, because if he knows that, then he's able to completely focus on what he's doing downrange, you know, and that was important to me, because if he's doesn't have his mind completely in with himself and what's going on there with him and his guys, then it's bad, because he's in danger's way a lot, you know, so he needs to be able to have his mind on that and not be worried about things going on back home, and know that I've got it, that I'm good.
Yeah. So you have to be extremely emotionally ready, stable. I could get this done. So you have to have that same kind of drive, really, that enables you to power through as much as he's powering through.
Yeah. Well, we both have a job, you know, we both have a job. And, you know, the hardest times were almost the days leading up to the deployments, because, you know, all you're thinking about is, oh my gosh, we've got 3 days. Oh, we've only got 2 days. And, you know, it gets to a point you're so ready for the deployment to just start. So then the clock is ticking to come home, you know, and you can start the countdown, and then I can go into my mode and he can go into his mode until we are back together again.
The amount of emotional preparation that you need to do, and then he's on his job. So you're now, you know, as you say, the clock is ticking for the homecoming. And how did you explain to the children when they were young, what was Daddy doing? And I mean, I imagine it's very much like the books, but did they have a sense of any kind of danger that it was in?
It's real funny that you asked that, because Scott always told the boys he was doing paperwork. You know, I got to go do paperwork. I got to do paperwork, you know. And obviously, as a Green Beret, paperwork is not necessarily what he's doing, you know. So it was really kind of cute, you know, when we premiered our play Last Out, and they was doing a question answer period. A question was asked to one of our sons, who at the time was 18 years old, and something was said about, well, what did you think about this? And he was like, well, gosh, he wasn't doing paperwork. I always thought he was doing paperwork. So it was I mean, obviously at that age, he really knew, you know, by then that Dad wasn't doing paperwork, but it was really cute, you know, because that is what Scott always told the boys, is Dad's got to go do some paperwork, so that they wouldn't worry. You know, they were young, they were kids. They needed to be able to be kids and not be worried about their dad.
Yeah. But that's really great to know that that's what he said, and that enabled them to be free and not worry about him. So
Right.
you mentioned the play Last Out, The Elegy of a Green Beret is the play that Scott wrote. He said it's not an autobiography, but it's a compilation of true events and people that he knew. I saw the play on television now with COVID. I know that you're not traveling around with it through live productions, but I saw it on the
Fox Nation.
Fox Nation,
Mhm.
right? And it was incredibly moving, incredibly powerful story. As a non-veteran, I watched and learned and cried, as I told you, from like the word go. I mean, it was unbelievably moving, and it covered the role of the effect that it had on the character of the wife, who Scott says is very closely modeled after you. And there was incredible support, just as you're saying, we each had our jobs. That really came across in the play, how tremendously supportive this character were of his call to duty. And it really was a calling for him, and he didn't want to give it up. The story is of the last one who's out, and you don't ever want to leave unless you have finished what you started out to do, which was impossible with that kind of war. And I just feel that the whole expression of the relationship shown through his deployments and his coming home and how resilient you have to be. I don't think people recognize that the person that we might be standing next to in line or seeing in the grocery store or walking around may be dealing with this incredible responsibility and service to our country, because we think that's the mom and they're the boys and Scott's gone, and without really recognizing all that you are going through and dealing with. Did you at any time feel like, I can't do this? This is too hard. I need to get some help for myself. Did you have a support system for yourself?
Well, I think everybody's different. What may work for one doesn't for another. But my friends were they were everything to me. And it's not that my family wasn't, but my family lived along like 12-hour drive away from most of the deployments. And Scott's family was about 9 hours away. But I had some of the best friends in my neighborhood, and our kids were all the same age. Everybody was military. Their husbands were either gone at the same time, or they had just gotten back, or they were getting ready to leave. And so exactly what each other's feeling. And so
Yes.
just the support that we had for each other, because we got together with the kids, with play groups. You could always tell if something was off, with one of us. And at that point, it's like, hey, I'm coming to pick the kids up. You're going to have a night to yourself, that kind of thing. And we had our bunco nights where it was just the girls. And, it was just a really great support system that I had with my friends. And to this day, I mean, I met a lot of them when my oldest was in kindergarten, so 5 years old. And now my oldest is 22 years old. And we get together several times a year and do girls' trips. And they're still my closest friends because we've been through so much together. Now there are family readiness groups as well. In whichever unit deploys, they usually always have a family readiness group. I was a lot more involved with that on the first couple of deployments that Scott did, because we were at Fort Bragg. Once we moved to MacDill Air Force Base, they weren't quite as much of a group as what they were back at Fort Bragg. But, you know, and one thing with the family readiness group that I was going to, the instructor or the director or leader or whatever of the group was another wife whose husband was gone too. And Sharon Land, and she was amazing in what she did because there were not a lot of wives participating in the meetings. And I was trying to go and help her out wherever I could. But when our unit deployed, and it was early on, not long after 9/11 and early on, and so we were trying to really get more wives to participate. And she had an idea that she did that I just think was absolutely phenomenal. She was friends with the chaplain that was deployed with all of our husbands, and he was taking pictures just all the time of our husbands. And I say husbands because at the time it was all men because we didn't have any females in the unit, but he was getting pictures of just different things around their home base and it was really cool. He would send all of these pictures to Sharon, and she was putting them together to music on a video slideshow. And she showed those every time, every month when we got together for a family readiness group meeting. She started off the meeting showing that slideshow. So,
oh my gosh,
we would end up with close to 100 wives in there because everybody wanted to come to see if they were going to see a picture of their husband, you know. And it was so good on her part to actually make that happen, because once the meeting once the slideshow was over, then you've got a room full of wives that are literally, doesn't matter the age, demographic, doesn't matter anything, you know, they all are going through the exact same thing. All of our husbands are gone, you know, and then it becomes just a way to talk and chat and how are you doing and what can I do to help you kind of thing. So those are the things that really helped me.
I think that idea of being able to gather together and be able to see your loved one must have been really wonderful, a wonderful experience. And with all of you sharing that same experience, I wanted to ask, what was it like for an encounter, let's say, with a friend who was a civilian and did not have any sense of what you were going through? Were the conversations stilted, like, well, how are you doing? And I mean, were they not able to really understand what you were going through?
Yeah, well, they do, because they, you know, especially the ones like you said, you know, earlier, that you've not been around the military.
Right.
And there's a lot of people like that. And I have some closest friends of mine that I grew up with that have never been around the military. And so when they look at you and your husband's going to be gone for a year, they worry about you, they feel sorry for you, you know, all those things. And I'm always like, no, I'm good. You know, I mean, this is what we signed on for. We knew this was the way it was going to be, you know, I'm good. So that's pretty much what I would encounter for the most part.
Right. I was shocked that in the back of the children's book, Scott had written that 93% of Americans, of civilians, do not have daily encounters with service members. And I was telling you and confessing that that was true for me. My dad was in the Navy, but just for a really brief period of time when he was college age. But he never really talked about it very much. And as I said, it was just really a brief stint. So I never knew anybody that was in the service. And this whole summit has just been an extraordinary experience for me to be able to learn just not only the incredible courage and sacrifice and dedication for anybody to give their life for this country, to be willing to do that. I don't feel that on our end as civilians that we really get it. And I'm really hoping that through these kind of educational experiences and through the play, people will really get it just goes right to your core when you are talking to a veteran about their experiences and their story. Can you tell me a little bit? You're the executive producer of the play, right?
Whatever that means. I'm still trying to figure that one out.
You're the one in charge. But in the play, can you let us know, those that are listening to this, how did this come about? Were you and Scott talking about it? Did you? He mentions in his interview that he did with Charlie that there was a period of time, I gather, when you were working on this, and you let him know what was going on while he was gone. And he said he didn't have any idea, but it was at that moment that you were really saying, look, this is what I went through. You're thinking everything was fine, but let me just sort of catch you up. And that he was just overwhelmed sort of with what you had really been through. And I think that comes through in the play. There's a moment where that really comes out. Can you talk about how the play evolved with you all working on it together?
Sure. You saying that you never had any experience with the military, around the military, and what the high percentage is of people that are like that. I mean, I was that way myself until I married the military. I grew up and I was never around it, and
Yeah.
so most people are that way. And that was a big part of why this play was written and why Scott wrote the play, is because he wanted more people to understand military and the families and what they're going through and what they go through. And I think a lot of it, Scott and I, of course, when he was writing the play, it took him a couple of years to write the play. And, then all of a sudden, he writes it and he wants to act in it. And it became this whole, we're actually going to do this kind of thing. And so the conversations just got deeper and deeper between us and the things that each of us experienced when we weren't together, when Scott was deployed. And it wasn't, like I was saying before, it wasn't that I was keeping it from him. It's just, it was things that happened at home that I dealt with because he didn't need to be worried with it. And then when you come back together, when they come home, you tend to just kind of, oh, great, that's behind us now. We're together. Let's move forward, And so it's not that you're keeping it from them. It's just kind of things that we just really hadn't talked about. And so when he was writing the play and he was really needing to get the character of Lynn really deep and know her and know how she was feeling. And plus Aim Livingston, who plays Lynn, she really needed to know how to feel and all with it as well, because she was not married to a military spouse. So that was when we got into deeper conversations and Scott learned more about what does kind of go on in the home front, what you do deal with, and you kind of push down and just kind of keep going. So that's how all of that came about. But what was really interesting is as the show was traveling, and we do a talk back at the end of the play, in every town we would go to, there'd be a lot of military there, a lot of civilians, but a lot of military as well. And we were amazed at the number of close couples that had experienced so much of the same deployments and things as Scott and I. And they would come tell us after the play, we're going to have a whole new conversation on our ride home, because they had never really talked about it either. And now they were seeing what each other was going through, because it really sheds a light on what the family's going through at home. And it sheds a light on the one that's deploying all the time as to kind of why he's doing it, why he keeps wanting to go back and keeps feeling the need to go back, which a lot of times when you're the one back home, you're like, I don't understand why you don't want to be home. I don't understand why you're trying to go back over there. And it really sheds a light on that too. And so from both sides, it just really gives the civilian and a real perspective of what the military families go through.
Yeah, it was just, there were so many things that were covered in the play. He just did a really extraordinary job writing it and acting in it. And when you have the talk back, I could see that would be such a great opportunity for people to really, because you're right in that moment of feeling all of that, to be able to really have the emotions and have things come up that you want to know. And there was also a therapist that was part of it who was saying, if you're triggered, take some breath, and literally went through the process of having the audience be able to calm themselves, because it is so emotional. And I was thinking about Scott and thinking, how does he go to that emotional place and do this play over and over? Because, I mean, I would imagine he would be feeling it over and over. Did he have like a special thing that he needed to do to kind of get out of that
Well,
more
you know,
specifically?
the play was just hugely therapeutic for Scott. I mean, it really, really, really was, because there's a lot that he deals with that, you know, he did in Afghanistan or was around or saw, or, you know, just everything that goes with the deployment. And
Right.
so, you know, he pushed things down too, to be able to come
Mhm.
home and just get back into the motion of just being a dad again, and just, you know, a husband and that kind of thing. So he was really able to deal with things that he had never dealt with before, that you see in the play. You know, so much that you
Absolutely.
see in the play is really a part of what we've been through. And
Mhm.
Doc Diego is who you're speaking of. And Doc Diego, he's a friend of ours. He traveled to every single play performance that we did. He was right there. If, I mean, we had people that would get triggered during the play and would get up and
Yeah.
walk out, and Diego would follow them out and talk to them, and they would actually be able to come back in and finish the play. And it was just absolutely phenomenal.
Mhm.
The therapy that this was for Scott, and has
Yeah.
been for so many people. I mean, it's just been, and I
Absolutely.
think that's something that we did not necessarily expect, because Scott knew that this is something he really wanted to do, that was helping him to work through things he had. And then when I was having to talk about things and bring things up that I had dealt with, I realized I had some things that, you know, actually had really triggered me, that were coming back up with the play. So, you
Mhm.
know, we used Dot Diego. He was really good to help us all move forward. And, you know, every night before Scott would get on the stage, he does a little breathing exercise with Diego to kind
Right.
of do his breaths and do his breathing, and get him set to where he needed to be to go on stage and perform each
Mhm.
performance.
That was really so wonderful and really wise. By being able to calm yourself down and ask the questions, you're able to sort of stabilize your audience before they walk out. So it's just really a brilliant thing to do.
Well, but
And
what we actually had, you know, I've got some friends of mine whose husbands said, I'm not going. I'm not going to go see that. You can go see it. I'm not going to see that. It's going to bring up too much that
yeah,
I don't want to. And they all ended up coming because their wives were more like, okay, I really want you to go with me. I want us to do this together. And not a single one of them regretted doing it. They
mhm.
all were so happy they'd done it, and it actually put them in a different place than what they had been, and it actually helped them to be able to work through their emotions as well. So
Mhm.
just so much came out of the play that we just really did not expect.
Oh, it's just remarkable. And what Scott said, which I thought was interesting too, is that people see the play multiple times and have different responses at different viewings of it, because it's like you can go through one layer and then come back and watch it and then go through another layer of
Right.
what you're dealing with and pick up, because there's so much content,
Mm-hmm.
and it is so beautifully written and so beautifully performed that it's just really an emotional experience. You really are immersed. And I was understanding again about the military family, from the courtship to the birth of the first child to the children getting ready. Mom, you know, got to go for
Mm-hmm.
basketball, and then really powerful moment where Lynn is hearing something, and it's like everything just is caving in, this fear. And it really is a primal scream that you hear. And I think Scott said that scream will lay you out. I think that's the way he described it. And it just, in that moment, it's like all of the strength in the world in that moment. And then she has to pull herself together to go off to the basketball game. It just speaks volumes about the incredible strength and courage. But people also, I think, it's important for them to understand that there's a trauma response. The family is hyper vigilant the whole time, that the service member is away. They're in a trauma state themselves because they are on high alert and they have things they have to do and they have children that they have to protect. It is just incredible to see sort of the parallel that you really are on your own mission. You are really serving in your own kind of war. We can't take that for granted. So having the play and the books, and Scott there's another book that I thought was wonderful, which was the Straight Talk about military transition. Mm-hmm. And while they're doing their jobs and you were doing your job, it's something completely different when they are discharged. There's going to be no more going back or deployment. It is now over. And that is so difficult for so many veterans. That is often the point at which they truly have their biggest struggle. And they often say, my problem wasn't when I was in combat. I was focused. I knew what my mission was. I knew what my purpose was. But coming home, many feel like ghosts. They feel like they're not seen. And they have had this powerful bonding beyond any description that I can fathom, the bonding and the brotherhood and the love that they have for their tribe. And now they're, as one doctor described, they're orphaned, you know? So when you're coming back and you have a spouse and you have children, you have a tribe, and it's still a difficult transition. But you think of the ones that come back that don't have that. For some, the military is the only real family unit they've known. And they got away from bad situations at a young age and joined up. And that gave them the order, the discipline, the family bonding community that they never had. What was it like for you when Scott was done? He has talked about a very powerful moment when he thought he was going to take his life. And that, I think, your son came into the room or called him and that snapped him out of it. But can you share even like where he was in that space? Was it soon after he came home, or was it after a while of being home that he had that challenge?
Well, it was after a while of being home, because Scott's wanted to be a Green Beret since he was 14 years old. And everything he did starting at 14 years old was to meet that goal. And then when he met that goal and did it, 23 years he was in the military when he retired, you know, at that point, it's like, okay, so the goal I've set for myself all my life, I'm 41, 42 years old, and I'm done. I've done it. I'm retired. Now what, you know?
Right.
And I think he would think he wanted to do one thing, and he'd kind of start it and realize it's not necessarily what he wanted to do. And then he would kind of get onto something else. And so wrote a book, you know, which was his Game Changers book, and just really trying to kind of find what he wanted to do. And then he went to, during that period that he just kind of felt like, I'm not in a good place. I'm not happy. I'm not any fun to be around. You know, I'm making life miserable for my wife and for the boys. So I think they would be better off if I wasn't here. And that's kind of how he felt, you know, because I'm not doing them any good and that kind of thing. And I think when he was standing in his closet and he heard Cooper, you know, come in the house home from school or wherever he was coming home from, it kind of snapped him out of it, you know. And I think after the fact, you know, that really scared him. He didn't want to ever get back to that position again. And that's when he kind of started, he and I were having deeper talks. You know, he was just really trying to figure out what he did want to do. And that's about the time that we had our nonprofit, you know, we started that. We had the children's book and the Mission America, you know, that's where that book came in to play. Right. He had a friend that actually was thinking of taking his life, and Scott talked him through it. You know, they just really talked details about what each other was going through. and it saved his life, both of their lives. And so Scott started just taking notes on different things, like, this helped me when I was going through that dark period, and I tried this and I did that, and before you knew it, he had a book, and we were like, let's make it a book for transitioning soldiers, or military. And that's where that came into play, So I wanted to touch on one thing too that you were saying, as far as when Scott was deployed and I would be back home, and you mentioned the word trauma and that kind of thing. I never saw it like that, because in my eyes, Scott's out there living his dream. He loved what he did, and that was what was really a very hard thing for us, because when he was deployed, that was when he was actually doing the part of his job that he loved. That was his, the part that you always train for, and now you're actually doing it, and that's what he loved. And I took a lot of peace in knowing that he was doing what he loved. I mean, it's very hard that we had to be away from each other whenever he was doing that part of it. But I really took peace in the fact that that's what he loved to do. And so in my mind, he and I chose the military life, but the kids didn't. The kids did not, And so it was very important to me that whenever Scott was gone, that me and the kids, we just carried on as if nothing was different. They still did the things they wanted to do. They still, did the activities they wanted to do. I was never going to say, you can't do that because I'm by myself and I can't get you to and from here and your brother, to and from here at the same time. I just found a way to make it happen because I didn't want them to not get to do something just because Dad was deployed. And so really and truly, me setting my mind to all of those things when Scott was gone, it kept me busy, and me and the boys always had a special something we would look forward to, like every 2 or 3 weeks, and we would go do that. And by the time we got done with that, we had something else to look forward to, whether it was grandparents coming to visit or us going somewhere. And then before you know it, a month's gone by, 2 months have gone by. So me focusing on all of those things is what would help me get through the deployments, and not feel like, it was trauma and that kind of thing. It's just, we were doing what we had to do. That was my job, and Scott's, job was his job. So.
Well, that's really important to make that distinction. I think that because of your mindset, because of how you felt that you were in it together, and that also is in the play, that that we would get off this ride together at the time, that it wasn't right for both of us. And in your situation, you absolutely knew what to do, and you felt he was doing what he loved and you were doing your job. And I think that is that you managed these deployments unlike many others that I have read and heard about. They don't understand, why are you leaving? There was one thing that I'd read about where a wife found a letter where her husband was planning to deploy and had not told her yet. And she felt betrayed that this is what he was going to do. So that was an opportunity for them to be able to work through that together. And he explained to her. And so there's just so much that goes on in every nuance of the missions. And the fact that you all have been married so long is such a testament to how solid your relationship is. And I think that's something important when at the moment of transition, a lot of marriages break down at that point because they can't communicate. And how were you able to communicate when Scott was at that dark moment? Was he letting you know? Was he hiding it from you? How did you manage did you say, we got to deal with this? Or what did you do?
The word communicate, I mean, that is the key word in every one of these situations, because yes. Scott and I have always communicated about everything. And with the military, I know, you may be today you're finding out you're going to deploy for a year, and then tomorrow you come home and, oh, it's not going to happen anymore. And the next day you come home and, oh, now we are deploying. It's going to be 6 months. Scott and I always communicated all that, because we knew how the military does. We know it can change from one day to the next. And so we always communicated everything. And I think that's what really helped us, because there wasn't anything that just all of a sudden popped up, or we were always talking about it. And I think that was the biggest thing that happened with us when Scott was going through the transition, from the military, because he wasn't communicating anymore. I could totally tell that something was wrong, but he wasn't talking, and I think in some ways he felt like maybe he's not strong if he talks about it, or, he feels like he's, weak and somehow, but, that's not the way it is at all, because it's amazing what you can get through when you communicate through things, and that was the biggest thing, because once, that day in the closet happened and Cooper came home and Scott didn't want to be in that position again. And that's when, he came to me and we had a talk like we've never had before. And from that day forward, we've both been healing and moving forward together in transition, and the play was a big part of it. And our nonprofit's a big part of it. And, our for-profit that we do, I mean, he found his tribe again, and is very happy, and we work together now. And so there's so many, I think military think that it's over, when they get out of the military. Right. I've done what I was going to do. And that's not the case. You will find something that you can do again that you may even like better than the military, because now what Scott loves, he's able to do right here, and I'm able to do it with him, and we're not away from each other deployed, Right. So it's just amazing to communicate and all what you can get yourself through. And yes, there are a lot of wives, out there and moms that really struggle with deployments, and extended family can do so much to help, reach out to them, go visit them, Right. If you're close by, that's awesome. If you're not, I mean, you can still manage to get a visit in here and there, talk to other relatives to where maybe, you're not all coming at the same time. And then it gives that wife and mom something to look forward to every so often, and it really helps. I know my mother-in-law, something she did one time, I think it was the first deployment that Scott was gone for almost a year, and the boys were like 5, 3, and 1. And it was Mother's Day, and there was a knock on the door, and I opened the door, and it was the pizza guy. And he had a stack of pizzas in his hand. And I'm like, well, I didn't order these. And it was a note that just said, you shouldn't have to cook on Mother's Day. And it was from my mother-in-law. And it's just amazing. Wonderful. How the extended family can really pull through for you when they know that you're going through just, it's a rough time, when you're by yourself, and you do worry about your spouse downrange, but you try not to, because you don't want the kids to, to see you worried. And so, right. There's lots that the extended family can do. And that's wonderful for the wife and mom herself. She needs to kind of know what works for her. Because I knew I've got some people that are like, no, I cannot be away from my kids. I got to be with my kids all the time. I knew that was not going to work for me. I had to have a little bit of time to myself, right. Every Friday when my 2 older ones were in school, and preschool, and my littlest one who did a mother's morning out for just like 5 hours, and I would not let myself do laundry or housework or anything like that during that time. That was me to go have lunch with a friend, or to go shopping, or just something that I knew was going to be for me, that was going to help me be a better mom when I got back with my kids, and to move forward. So a lot of it is just kind of learning yourself and knowing yourself.
I think that's so important, because your self-care, it's the story about putting the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child, yeah. and that's so important. I mean, there's so many things that you're saying. I think that there needs to be, Monty's book on all of these incredible steps that could help somebody who is new to this, how you did it, because you obviously did it really, really well, and continue to do it with the play. And I want to talk also about the nonprofit, The Hero's Journey. And I'll just read this part, because that's based on Joseph Campbell's incredible work. Joseph Campbell described a universal story structure known as the hero's journey. And there are there's a structure to it where the hero hears a call. Reluctantly, he answers that call and departs on a perilous journey. Along the way, the hero is tested and must battle enemies inside and outside himself. The hero returns home transformed. And it said this timeless story structure is what our military and first responder warriors and their families live every day. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience with the people that have taken part in, I think you have a storytelling kit that will help the process. Can you describe that a little bit about how it all works to help heal?
Sure. Well, Scott's a storyteller, and that's what we do for our regular for-profit business. And he really wanted to bring that in with Hero's Journey because he's, for himself, that's been so important in his transition is storytelling. And so he now teaches storytelling workshops on the Hero's Journey side, and we put together a kit of videos that military guys that are transitioning or just want to learn to tell their story, find your voice, tell your story. They can go through the storytelling toolkit, and they can learn how to find the ways to tell their story, because it's just really, you know, they've proven in so many different studies to tell your story. It really helps with just brain trauma, just all kinds of issues. It really helps to tell your story and move forward with it. And so we're having a lot of fun with it, because it's just so awesome to have the people that have come to work with us, and they're in such a bad place for just trauma that they've been through, PTS, and and things that have happened in the military to where, you know, they've lost limbs and, you know, brain injuries and things like that. And to be able to work with them, to learn to tell their story, and to watch them just get stronger as a person, to where they're just going out, and then before you know it, they're doing their own thing and telling their story. And it's just been just a really great thing for us to be able to do and to watch.
It's wonderful. And is it open also to civilians if they want
veterans?
to?
It's open. It's for veterans.
It's all veterans. Okay.
All veterans. It's for the veterans. Anybody transitioning, or not even transitioning, just being in the military. You know, you can go and you can download the kit, and it's free. And it's really been great. And we're actually kind of doing some things to rework it right now.
Do they read their stories to the other veterans? Do they share, or is it's an internal?
Well, the workshop, the toolkit, if you go through the videos, you're kind of doing that on your own. But we actually we have done, and we're planning in the future to actually do workshops in person. And at that point, yes, you know, you have, you know, people up right in front of you helping you to take you through the videos, but they're not videos. It's the same thing you see on the video, but they're taking you through it in person, working the exercises, talking your stories. You'll get in partners, tell your story to a partner, tell your story to the group. It's such a process. Like, you know, for some military, they think, well, I'm not telling my story. I'm not a storyteller. I'm not going to do that. But the process and the way it's done, it's just phenomenal, because you're telling your story before you even really know you're telling your story.
Right. That's right. Is described on the website as our services include therapeutic storytelling workshops, online learning courses, and books on the transition from service to civilian life for veterans, first responders, and their spouses and children. So it says, we help our warriors explore their narrative through all means of storytelling, like music, writing, acting, and comedy. I mean, that is just so exciting. And I know that there has been work done with veterans. There was an HBO production, I believe it was called We're Not Done Yet. And they took a group of veterans and they wrote their story. And they wrote it together and then acted it out for a live audience. And you could see that process of what was going on, and they had to agree on things and they would disagree on things. No, I don't want to do that because I don't want to walk that way because that's not the way I did it. And so they would, agree, okay, that bothers you. Let's, we'll fix that. And it was just the whole process was, and that's why I was wondering, is it something that's done collaboratively or is it, an individual experience? And it sounds like it could be
Either one. Yeah.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah. And
which
it's amazing, just like what you said. There's poems. People write poems. People write plays. People write movies. People write music. They sing music. They play guitar. There's so many different ways out there that you can express your story. And it's funny that you bring that up, because that's actually the next thing that we want to do with our nonprofit. Is we are looking for space here in the Tampa area where we live, because we want a black box theater, and we want people to be able to come in to our theater, veterans, and we want them to be able to perform their story however they want to perform their story for whoever wants to come and watch. And it's just going to be so
wonderful,
therapeutic for them. And that's something that's our goal, and that's what we're really working towards right now, because Scott's had so many people reach out to him since we've been traveling around with the play.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I've written a play. How did you get yours out there? What did you do? Or, hey, I've written a song. I don't sing though. Do you know anybody that could sing it? Hey, there's all these questions. And so that was when we were like, you know what, we really want to be able to have a theater that all these people can come to and they can perform. And then people in Tampa are like, hey, let's go see what's being performed at, the whatever we named the theater.
That's really terrific idea. Terrific idea.
And Veterans Day, we're actually going to do a little variety show for kind of how it could be with song and poem and play and story. And we're going to have about an hour and a half that we're going to perform just on our Facebook Live through a space. And that way it's going to be kind of people can get a feel for what it is that we want to eventually be able to do to help with the storytelling with our military.
That is just wonderful. And you're right. There's so many different avenues that you can tell the story. I mean, even artwork, painting.
Exactly.
There's a whole, there's a whole art therapy type of program. And it's actually, I think, anything artistic is therapeutic, whether you're wanting therapy or not. It just, the whole process is magical, honestly, I believe. And I think that one thing that Scott was mentioning is that sort of out of the darkness, can really come a light of what you're meant to do, your purpose, when you can pass through that experience to the other side. And that the skills and the things that you used in the military can be adapted to different avenues in civilian life. And it's recognizing that and how you can translate it. And I mean, this is clearly a gift to be able to show people the way that they can be still in charge, in control of their lives, and sort of back into their lives. This is sort of taking the internal part of you and, giving it breath, giving it life, being able to use that craft and put it in the books, and having put it in play, and then open the dialogue so that people are living the story with you and responding to it. I mean, it's just really fantastic. How do your kids respond to this whole creative endeavor that you all are doing, from the nonprofit to this new concept that you have about the theater and then the play?
I mean, they're amazing. And I know, of course, they experienced what Scott went through when he transitioned, and they knew, hey, what's wrong with Dad? What's wrong with Dad? And, Dad would come into the room and you could tell by his mood, okay, let's all leave the room because Dad's not in a very good mood, kind of thing. And so to be able to see him come back to who he is and find himself, they know that this helps him so much. And all three of them are just right there every way they possibly can be. Our oldest is a second lieutenant in the Army now.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
So it's amazing. They're amazing. They support in every way they possibly can.
Isn't that fantastic? So it's a complete family enterprise, even after discharge, it continues to
It
be,
does. It does.
you know,
It
so
does.
it's just an
Our middle
amazing
son,
experience.
our middle son, Cooper, who's a sophomore at USF, he came to just about every single play performance.
Isn't that wonderful?
He wanted to be there, help set up the stage, take the stage down, be there for every performance, be there for me, be there for his dad. I mean, so they all have their little ways that they are just huge supporters of us.
And I had read that veterans are part of the production team itself. Are all the actors veterans?
The three of them are Brian and Lenny and Scott are veterans. AIM has a member in the military, like kind of extended
Right.
family that was in the military. And then our sound and our lights, everybody's had some sort of affiliation, whether it's them or they grew up a military brat or. So yeah, it's very, very veteran oriented. And one of my closest friends who I met through military, her daughter and my son, they started kindergarten together, and they're 22 years old now. And she was our producer, or not our producer, but our tour manager for Last Out. And she lost her husband to suicide several years ago. And so this has just been awesome having her on board with us. And now she's on board with our Hero's Journey with the nonprofit, helping us there now that we're not traveling with the play. So it's just, there's so many stories in all of us that are on our team of 17 with the play.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
If you had like one piece of wisdom, let's say somebody's watching this and they have been at the end of their rope and think, I'm not going to be able to make this. They're having their moment in the closet where they just say, I want it to be over. Is there something that you can say that from your experience, how to help them know that it's worth hanging on?
Just stay with it and keep going. It gets better. You just communicate, and whether it's with your kids or with your friends or family or a therapist or whatever, your husband, just communicate, because it's just amazing what you can get through. And yes, I had my moments for sure. That scream came from a conversation Scott and I had that I told him about what I did one time. So we all have our moments. Nobody's perfect. Everybody deals with it the way they deal with it. Just kind of have to I knew I had to have my kids on a schedule. So I knew that I had my time after this period at night. I had to have a little bit of me time on Fridays. My husband and I have always had to have time, the two of us. I grew up with my parents doing that. That was always very important to me, for us to have weekend getaways or a week getaway in the summer, just the two of us. All of those things, we just always made sure we made them happen, because they're all a part of what made us stronger with each other and made me stronger when I had to be by myself.
That's so important.
There's nothing that either one of you can say that's going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. It's things you've been through. It's things your spouse has been through. You love each other. You have a relationship, and you need to talk about it, or you're not going to be able to work through it. It's important to get it out, because, in the military, the guys, they push things down in a lot of ways, because if it gets out to their commander or something that they had to talk to a therapist about this or that, before you know it, they say, well, you're not deployable.
That's right.
Deploy you. And that would be a nightmare for our military, because they train to go do what they do downrange when they deploy. So they do, to a certain extent, do push things down and don't talk about it. So in a lot of ways, it is kind of changing when they transition out, find their voice. They're trying to find their voice again to tell their story,
Yes.
And then they're amazed at how it can help them.
Yeah, I so appreciate you and Scott being part of this project. It is an honor to know you, and
thank you. I appreciate you asking us to be a part of this, because we're honored to be asked to be a part of it.
Thank you very much. And I know there are going to be many people watching that are going to really get so much out of both your and Scott's interviews. So
I hope so.
Thank you.